The train whistle pierced the air as Fallon clutched her worn leather valise to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. Montana Territory, 1875. This desolate landscape would be her home now. Through the smudged window, she caught her first glimpse of Silverdale, a collection of wooden buildings clinging to existence at the edge of the frontier. What had she done? Trading the crowded tenements of Boston for marriage to a stranger, a man she knew only through 6 months of correspondence. Last stop, Silverdale. Everybody out. The conductor bellowed, startling Catherine from her thoughts. She smoothed her travel-worn dress, adjusted her bonnet, and gathered her courage along with her few belongings. At 22, she had made the most consequential decision of her life based on flowery letters and promises of security. Harold Prescott had described himself as a successful rancher seeking a respectable wife. His letters painted a picture of a comfortable home and prosperous future, everything her life as a seamstress in Boston couldn't provide after her parents' deaths left her alone in the world. The platform was nearly empty as Catherine descended from the train, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dusty street. She searched anxiously for the man whose daguerreotype she carried, a stern-faced figure with a neatly trimmed beard and proper suit. "Miss Fallon." A gruff voice called out. Catherine turned to see a tall man approaching, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. This was Harold Prescott, but he bore only a passing resemblance to the image she carried. He was older than she'd expected, perhaps 40, with lines etched deeply around his mouth, lines that suggested they rarely curved into smiles. "Mr. Prescott," she acknowledged, forcing warmth into her voice. "How wonderful to finally meet you." His eyes swept over her with cold assessment. "You're smaller than I expected. I need a woman who can work." The words struck her like a slap. Catherine swallowed her shock. "I assure you, Mr. Prescott, I'm stronger than I appear," he grunted, taking her valise without offering his hand. "Come along then. I've got the wagon waiting." "It's a fair distance to the ranch." Catherine followed, fighting the urge to turn and run back to the train. But there was no going back. She had spent nearly every cent she had on this journey. The wagon was old and weathered, much like Prescott himself. As they bumped along the rutted road leading out of town, Catherine attempted conversation. "Your letters described such beautiful country," she ventured. "I look forward to seeing your ranch." "Ranch," he scoffed. "Don't go expecting some palace. It's a working place, and I'll expect you to pull your weight." "Of course," Catherine said quietly, her stomach tightening. "I never shied away from hard work, Mr. Prescott." "Harold," he corrected sharply. "You'll be my wife by week's end. Best get used to using my Christian name." The landscape rolled by in silence after that, the beautiful Montana wilderness passing unappreciated as Catherine wrestled with her growing unease. The man beside her bore little resemblance to the thoughtful correspondent whose words had convinced her to travel across the country. As they crested a hill, Harold pointed toward a small cluster of buildings in the distance. "There it is." Catherine's heart sank. The prosperous ranch Harold had described was little more than a dilapidated cabin with a sagging porch, a weather-beaten barn, and a few ramshackle outbuildings. A handful of cattle grazed in the nearby pasture, nothing like the substantial herd his letters had claimed. "It's not quite what I expected," she managed. "Expected fancy trimmings, did you?" Harold snorted. "This here's real life, girl, not some Eastern fairy tale." The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the cabin. Before Catherine could respond, Harold leaped down and strode toward the door. "Bring your things," he called over his shoulder. "And there's water needs hauling from the creek before supper." Catherine climbed down slowly, fighting back tears. She had made a terrible mistake. The inside of the cabin matched its exterior, sparse, neglected, and showing signs of long bachelor habitation. A single room served as kitchen and living area, with a curtained-off section that presumably contained a bed. Dust covered every surface, dishes were piled in a basin, and the sour smell of unwashed linens permeated the space. "You'll want to get this place in order," Harold said, lighting a stubby candle as dusk fell. "I've been making do, but that's why I sent for a wife." Catherine set her valise down carefully. "I'll begin first thing tomorrow." "You'll begin now," Harold countered. "Creek's just beyond that stand of cottonwoods. 2 buckets by the door. I want coffee and something to eat within the hour." Without waiting for her response, he dropped into a rickety chair and pulled a bottle from beneath it. Catherine watched in dismay as he took a long pull of amber liquid. "Well, what are you waiting for?" he barked. Catherine grabbed the buckets and hurried outside, grateful for the chance to escape. As she made her way to the creek, tears streamed down her face. The man who had written those gentle letters was a fiction. The real Harold Prescott was harsh, demanding, and clearly expected a servant rather than a wife. The water was cold as Catherine filled the heavy buckets. By the time she returned to the cabin, her arms ached and water had sloshed onto her dress. Harold barely looked up as she entered. "Took you long enough," he muttered. "Get the fire built up and something cooking." Catherine moved mechanically through the unfamiliar kitchen, finding meager supplies, some beans, salt pork, and a few potatoes sprouting eyes. She worked silently, aware of Harold's eyes on her back as she prepared the simplest meal she could manage. "You don't say much," he observed, his voice slightly slurred as the bottle's contents diminished. "I'm tired from traveling," Catherine replied carefully. "Well, don't get too comfortable with rest. Plenty to be done around here." As they ate the humble meal in silence, Catherine stole glances at her future husband. His hands were rough and dirt-crusted, his fingernails blackened. He ate noisily, barely using the tarnished fork beside his plate. When he caught her watching, his eyes narrowed. "Something wrong with your food?" he demanded. "No, Sir Harold," she corrected quickly. "It's fine. Better be. You'll be doing all the cooking from now on." He pushed back from the table and stood. "Pastor Wilson's coming day after tomorrow to perform the ceremony. That gives you tomorrow to get this place looking respectable." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I'll be heading out at first light to check the north fence line. Expect me back by sundown." He moved toward the curtained area. "You can make yourself a pallet by the fire tonight." After he disappeared behind the curtain, Catherine allowed herself to breathe. She cleaned the dishes mechanically, made a crude bed near the dying embers, and finally let herself collapse in exhausted despair. How would she survive this place? This man? There was no money for a return ticket, no refuge to seek. Morning came too soon, with Harold banging around the cabin before dawn. He left without breakfast, merely grunting that there were chickens to feed and a garden patch that needed tending. The slamming door was almost a relief. Catherine spent the day in a frenzy of cleaning, trying to make the dismal cabin livable. She beat rugs, scrubbed floors, washed linens, and organized the chaotic kitchen. By midday, her hands were raw and her back aching, but the cabin was beginning to look habitable. As she worked in the small kitchen garden, pulling weeds from around stunted vegetables, Catherine became aware of being watched. She looked up to see a rider approaching slowly from the neighboring property to the east. Unlike Harold's slouched posture, this man sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the cloudless Montana sky. Catherine straightened, wiping her hands on her apron as the stranger drew closer. He reined his horse to a stop at the edge of the garden. "Afternoon, madam," he called, removing his hat to reveal thick golden-brown hair. His face was weathered but kind, with striking blue eyes that crinkled at the corners. "I'm Gabriel Porter. Own the Double P next door." "Catherine Fallon," she replied, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Fallon," his brow furrowed. "Thought Harold was expecting a bride." "We're to be married tomorrow," she explained, her voice catching slightly. Gabriel Porter's expression shifted subtly. "I see. Well, welcome to Montana territory, Miss Fallon." He seemed to hesitate before adding, "Harold mentioned he was sending for a wife, but I didn't expect." "That is, you're not quite what I pictured." Catherine wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I arrived yesterday." "And he left you alone already?" Gabriel frowned, looking around the property. "Typical." There was something in his tone that confirmed Catherine's worst fears. This neighbor clearly knew Harold well and didn't think much of him. "He's checking fence lines," Catherine said, feeling strangely defensive despite her own misgivings. Gabriel nodded, though his eyes remained troubled. "Well, I won't keep you from your work. Just wanted to introduce myself. If you need anything at all, the Double P is just over that rise." He pointed toward the east. "My ranch hand Miguel and I are usually around." "Thank you, Mr. Porter. That's very kind." He replaced his hat and gathered the reins. "Just Gabriel, please. Neighbors should be on friendly terms out here." His smile was warm, genuine in a way that made Catherine's chest tighten, especially when they're as few and far between as we are. As he rode away, Catherine found herself watching longer than was proper. There was something about Gabriel Porter that radiated reliability and strength qualities she was quickly realizing her future husband lacked. Harold returned at dusk, as promised, but the improvements Catherine had made to the cabin went unacknowledged. Instead, he complained about the fence posts needing replacement and demanded to know what she'd prepared for supper. "I met your neighbor today," Catherine mentioned as they ate. "Mr. Porter seemed very kind." Harold's face darkened. "Porter? That man's been trying to buy my land for years. Thinks his fancy Eastern money means he can just take whatever he wants." "He didn't mention anything about—" "Course he didn't," Harold interrupted. "Too clever for that. He'll act friendly while waiting for me to fail. Well, he can keep waiting." He jabbed his fork toward Catherine. "That's why I needed a wife. Someone to keep things running while I handle the real work." Catherine fell silent, understanding more clearly with each passing hour what her role was to be in this arrangement. The night passed uncomfortably on her makeshift bed. In the morning, Harold informed her that Pastor Wilson would arrive by noon, and she should make herself presentable. He then disappeared to the barn, leaving Catherine to contemplate the wedding that now seemed more like a sentence than a celebration. She donned her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had once belonged to her mother, and pinned her hair carefully. There were no flowers to gather for a bouquet, no guests to witness the ceremony, no cake or special meal prepared. Just a transaction, a business arrangement disguised as matrimony. Pastor Wilson arrived promptly at noon, a thin, serious man who barely looked at Catherine as he greeted Harold. The ceremony was brief and loveless, conducted in the newly cleaned cabin with only the clucking of chickens outside to serve as witnesses. When it was done, Pastor Wilson accepted a small payment from Harold, offered perfunctory congratulations, and departed as quickly as he had come. "Well, that's done," Harold said, as if they'd just completed a chore rather than exchanged vows. "I'll be heading to town for supplies. Need anything?" "No," Catherine replied softly, twisting the thin gold band on her finger, a hand-me-down from Harold's mother. He'd informed her brusquely. "Don't expect me back until late. Might stop at the saloon." After he left, Catherine sat alone in the cabin, now Mrs. Harold Prescott, feeling more isolated than she ever had in her life. Days turned into weeks, and Catherine settled into a grueling routine. She rose before dawn to prepare Harold's breakfast, tended to the chickens and garden, cleaned, mended, cooked, and fell into exhausted sleep each night. Harold rarely spoke except to criticize or make demands, and his temper grew shorter with each passing day. She discovered the true extent of his drinking problem when he returned from town one night, stumbling and belligerent. When she attempted to help him to bed, he struck her, sending her sprawling against the table. "Useless woman," he slurred. "Can't even cook a decent meal. Thought I was getting a proper wife." Catherine pressed herself against the wall, hand to her stinging cheek, as Harold continued his tirade before finally collapsing on their bed. That night, she slept in the barn, shivering and tearful, wondering how her life had come to this. The next morning, Harold acted as if nothing had happened, though his eyes narrowed when he noticed the bruise forming on her face. "You should be more careful," he said. "Clumsy women get hurt." Catherine said nothing, understanding the implicit threat. As summer progressed, Harold's absences grew more frequent, his return more unpredictable. Sometimes he would be gone for days, returning with empty pockets and bitter complaints about card games and bad luck. The meager funds Catherine had brought with her disappeared into his pocket one night while she slept, leaving her truly destitute and dependent. It was during one of Harold's extended absences that Catherine encountered Gabriel Porter again. She was attempting to repair a broken section of the chicken coop when the sound of hoofbeats made her look up. "Afternoon, Mrs. Prescott," Gabriel called, dismounting smoothly. Up close, Catherine could see the concern in his eyes as he noticed the fading bruise on her cheek. "Looks like you could use a hand with that." "Oh, I couldn't impose," she protested weakly, though the task was beyond her limited carpentry skills. "No imposition at all," he insisted, already examining the damaged structure. "Where's Harold?" "In town," Catherine replied, the lie coming easily now. In truth, she had no idea where her husband had been for the past 3 days. Gabriel's expression suggested he knew she wasn't being entirely truthful, but he didn't press. Instead, he set to work repairing the coop with efficient movements. Catherine watched his strong hands work the wood, so different from Harold's perpetually unsteady ones. "How are you settling in?" Gabriel asked as he worked. "Montana can be hard on newcomers." "I'm managing," she answered carefully. Gabriel paused, meeting her eyes directly. "Mrs. Prescott, Catherine, I hope you don't mind my saying, but you don't look like you're managing. You look exhausted." The simple kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Catherine blinked back sudden tears. "It's been an adjustment." Gabriel nodded, returning to his work. "Harold's not an easy man at the best of times. Never has been. But that doesn't give him the right to." He stopped himself, seemingly thinking better of whatever he had been about to say. They worked together until the coop was repaired, talking of inconsequential things: the weather, the territorial news, Gabriel's small herd of horses. He told her about coming west 5 years earlier, building the Double P from nothing into a modest but successful horse ranch. "My father was a banker in Philadelphia," he explained. "Expected me to follow in his footsteps, but I always dreamed of open spaces." "You've done well for yourself," Catherine observed, having glimpsed the neat buildings and well-maintained fences of the Double P from a distance. "I've been fortunate," he acknowledged, "and I've had help. Miguel's been with me since the beginning, couldn't have done it without him." As Gabriel prepared to leave, he hesitated beside his horse. "Catherine, I don't mean to overstep, but if things ever get difficult, my door is always open." No questions asked. The offer hung in the air between them, its implications clear. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to say more. "Just remember, you're not alone out here," Gabriel said, mounting his horse. "No matter what it feels like." Catherine watched him ride away, his words echoing in her mind. "You're not alone." But she was bound by vows and circumstances to a man who saw her as property, not a partner. When Harold finally returned that evening, he was in a dark mood. He complained about the meal, knocked over a chair, and fixed Catherine with an accusatory stare. Saw Porter's horse tracks outside. What was he doing here? He helped repair the chicken coop, Catherine answered truthfully. It was broken and the chickens were getting out. Harold crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her arm painfully. "You stay away from that man, you hear me? He's after my land and he'll use any means to get it." "He was just being neighborly," Catherine protested. The blow came without warning, knocking her to the floor. "Don't talk back to me, woman. This is my house and you're my wife. You do as I say." Catherine curled into herself, protecting her face as Harold continued his tirade. When he finally stormed out to the barn, she remained on the floor, trembling. This couldn't be her life. She couldn't live like this. That night she made a decision. When morning came, she would leave somehow, somewhere. She would find work, save money, start over. Anything was better than this slow death of spirit. Dawn broke clear and cold. Autumn's approach evident in the crisp air. Catherine moved silently around the cabin, gathering what few belongings she could carry. Harold still slept off his rage, his snores rumbling from behind the curtain. She had just fastened her shawl when the door crashed open. Harold stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. "Where do you think you're going?" Catherine froze, her small bundle clutched to her chest. I was going to gather eggs." "With your shawl and bag," he advanced on her. "You ungrateful woman, after everything I've done for you." "Please, Harold," Catherine retreated until her back hit the wall. "You're not well, you need help." "I need a wife who knows her place," he shouted, knocking the bundle from her hands. "You're not going anywhere, ever." What happened next was a blur of violence and terror. Harold's rage exploded fully, his fists landing with brutal precision. Catherine fought back at first, clawing and pushing, but he was stronger, fueled by alcohol and unchecked fury. When he wrapped his hands around her throat, black spots danced before her eyes. "I'll teach you to try and leave me," he growled. Catherine's consciousness was fading when the door burst open again. Through dimming vision, she saw a tall figure tackle Harold, sending them both crashing into the table. Then darkness claimed her. She woke to gentle hands and a soft voice. "Catherine, can you hear me?" Gabriel's concerned face swam into focus above her. They were outside, the morning sun warm on her face. "Harold," she croaked, her throat painful. "He's not going to hurt you anymore," Gabriel assured her, helping her to sit up. "Miguel's keeping an eye on him." Catherine became aware of her surroundings. They were in Gabriel's wagon, already some distance from the Prescott cabin. "Where are we going?" she asked weakly. "To my ranch. You need a doctor and you need somewhere safe." Gabriel's jaw was tight, a bruise forming where Harold had struck him. "I came to check on you after what I saw yesterday. Thank God I did." Catherine's hand went to her throat, feeling the tender flesh where Harold's fingers had dug in. "He'll come after me." "Let him try," Gabriel said grimly. "Miguel and I can handle Harold Prescott." The Double P Ranch was everything the Prescott place was not: well maintained, orderly, and welcoming. A low-slung ranch house of sturdy logs sat nestled against a stand of pines, with a large barn and corral nearby. Several fine horses watched curiously as the wagon approached. Miguel, a stocky man with kind eyes, hurried out to meet them. "Dios mío, what happened?" "Harold Prescott happened," Gabriel replied grimly, carefully lifting Catherine from the wagon. "Ride for Doc Jenkins, would you? Tell him it's urgent." Catherine was brought into the ranch house and settled in a clean bedroom that smelled of pine and fresh linens. A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked dark hair appeared with water and clean cloths. "This is Alina, Miguel's mother," Gabriel explained. "She helps keep house for us." Alina's gentle hands cleaned Catherine's wounds as she murmured soothing words in Spanish. Gabriel hovered in the doorway, his face tight with concern. "You're safe now," he promised. "Rest." Dr. Jenkins arrived within the hour, his weathered face grim as he examined Catherine. "Bruised ribs, throat contusions, possible concussion," he muttered, opening his bag. "Seen this kind of thing before. Damn shame." "Will she be all right?" Gabriel asked from the doorway. "With time and proper care," the doctor replied. "She's young and strong." He turned to Catherine. "Mrs. Prescott, I'm going to give you something for the pain. You need rest above all." As the laudanum took effect, Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness. She was vaguely aware of voices, Gabriel and the doctor speaking in low tones, Alina bringing broth and cool cloths, the sound of horses in the yard. Through it all, a sense of safety enveloped her, so foreign after weeks of constant fear. When she finally woke fully, sunlight streamed through curtained windows. Catherine lay still, cataloging her pains, less acute now but still present. The bedroom door opened quietly and Alina entered with a tray. "Ah, you are awake. Good." Her English was accented but clear. "Senor Gabriel has been very worried." "How long have I been here?" Catherine asked, surprised by the roughness of her voice. 2 days, Alina replied, helping her sit up against the pillows. "The doctor has come twice. He says you heal well." Catherine accepted a cup of broth, sipping slowly. "And my husband," Alina's expression darkened. "That man came yesterday, very angry. Senor Gabriel and Miguel sent him away." She made a dismissive gesture. "Sheriff Thompson came also. He took statements." The implications of this information settled over Catherine. Legal authorities were involved now. There would be no quiet return to her life with Harold, not that she wanted one. Gabriel visited later that afternoon, knocking gently before entering. He'd shaved and changed his clothes, but fatigue lined his face. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into a chair beside the bed. "Better," Catherine replied truthfully. "Thank you for everything." Gabriel shook his head. "Don't thank me. I should have intervened sooner. I knew what kind of man Harold was." "You couldn't have known he would." Catherine's hand went instinctively to her throat. "Maybe not," Gabriel conceded, "but I suspected. Everyone in the county knows Harold Prescott is a mean drunk with a temper. I just didn't think he'd." He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Anyway, Sheriff Thompson came by yesterday. Harold's been arrested." "Arrested?" Catherine whispered. "Attempted murder is a serious charge, even out here." Gabriel's eyes were gentle but serious. "Catherine, the sheriff will need your statement when you're stronger. And you should know divorce is possible in Montana territory. On grounds of cruelty, it can be granted relatively quickly." Divorce. The word hung in the air between them. Catherine had never considered it. Such things weren't discussed in her Boston upbringing. But the relief that flooded through her at the possibility was overwhelming. "I have no money," she said finally. "No way to support myself." "You don't need to worry about that right now," Gabriel assured her. "You can stay here as long as necessary. Alina enjoys having another woman around, and there's plenty of room." "I can't impose. It's not an imposition," he interrupted firmly. "It's what neighbors do, what friends do. Friends." The word warmed her more than she expected. The following weeks brought a gradual recovery. Catherine's physical wounds healed faster than her emotional ones, but each day brought a little more strength, a little more peace. Alina taught her to make tortillas and Spanish phrases, while Miguel showed her the gentle art of approaching the spirited horses Gabriel bred. Gabriel himself was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each evening to sit with Catherine on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in impossible colors. They talked of their childhoods, their journeys west, their hopes. Catherine learned that Gabriel had been engaged once in Philadelphia, but his fiancée had broken it off when he decided to pursue his Western dreams. She couldn't imagine life without society functions and proper tea services, he explained with a rueful smile. Can't say I blame her. This life isn't for everyone. I think it's beautiful, Catherine said honestly, gazing at the rolling landscape. Hard but beautiful. Sheriff Thompson came as promised, taking Catherine's statement with professional courtesy. He informed her that Harold remained in the territorial jail, awaiting trial. His drinking buddies abandoned him quick enough, the sheriff noted. Seems nobody wants to stand by a man who tries to kill his wife. Catherine filed for divorce with the sheriff's assistants, citing cruelty and attempted murder. The process would take time, but the sheriff assured her that given the circumstances, it was virtually guaranteed to be granted. As October painted the landscape in golds and reds, Catherine found herself settling into life at the Double P. She insisted on earning her keep, taking over much of the cooking and helping Alina with household tasks. Gabriel protested that it wasn't necessary, but Catherine needed to feel useful, to rebuild her sense of worth that Harold had systematically destroyed. One crisp afternoon, Gabriel found Catherine in the kitchen garden, harvesting the last of the season's vegetables. Thought you might like to see something, he said, offering his arm, if you're feeling up to a short ride. Curious, Catherine accompanied him to the stables where 2 horses stood saddled. She hesitated, she'd never ridden before. Don't worry, Gabriel assured her, noting her apprehension. Mariposa here is gentle as they come. I'll be right beside you. With Gabriel's patient instruction, Catherine found herself astride the placid mare, following him at a walk across the eastern pasture and up a gentle slope. At the crest, Gabriel dismounted and helped Catherine down, leading her to a flat rock overlooking the valley. The view took Catherine's breath away. The ranch spread below them, neat and orderly, while in the distance, mountains rose in purple majesty against the autumn sky. This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch, Gabriel confided, standing close beside her. Whenever I need to think or just be, I come here. It's magnificent, Catherine breathed. I bought this land 5 years ago when no one thought it would amount to anything, Gabriel said, pride evident in his voice. Most folks said I was a fool, too much winter, too little water, but I knew it had potential. Catherine turned to look at him, seeing the passion in his eyes as he surveyed his domain. Something stirred in her heart, admiration, certainly, but something deeper too. Something she wasn't ready to name. You've built something wonderful here, she said softly. Gabriel's eyes shifted to hers, his expression sobering. Catherine, there's something I need to tell you. I've been offered a contract to supply horses to the Army at Fort Ellis. It would mean significant money for the ranch. That's wonderful news, Catherine said, genuinely pleased for him. It also means I'd need to expand, add more grazing land. Gabriel hesitated. The Prescott property adjoins mine to the west. With Harold likely headed to prison, it will probably go up for auction for back taxes. Understanding dawned. You want to buy it. I've always wanted that land, Gabriel admitted. But I wanted to speak to you first. I know it was supposed to be your home, however briefly. If it would be painful for you, I'll look elsewhere to expand. The consideration in this simple act, consulting her feelings, prioritizing her comfort over his business interests, moved Catherine deeply. It was so fundamentally different from how Harold had treated her. I think, she said carefully, that seeing that land become part of something good and thriving would be healing, not painful. Gabriel's smile was like sunrise. I was hoping you'd say that. As they rode back to the ranch, side by side in the golden afternoon light, Catherine felt something unfurling within her, a cautious hope, a fragile joy. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she began to imagine a future that held promise rather than dread. November arrived with biting winds and the first dustings of snow. News came that Harold's trial had been swift. Multiple witnesses testified to his violent nature, and the evidence of his attack on Catherine was irrefutable. He was sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison. The divorce was granted soon after, the judge taking one look at Catherine's still healing injuries and declaring the marriage dissolved. Catherine Fallon once more. She felt both liberated and adrift. What will you do now? Gabriel asked as they sat before the fireplace that evening, a chess board between them. Catherine moved a piece before answering. I've been thinking about that. Alina mentioned that Silverdale needs a seamstress. Before I came west, that was my trade in Boston. You'd move to town. Gabriel's hand hovered over the board, his focus clearly no longer on the game. I can't stay here indefinitely, Catherine said gently. You've been more than generous, but I need to stand on my own 2 feet. Of course, Gabriel agreed, though his expression had fallen. You deserve your independence. They played in silence for several moves, the crackling fire the only sound in the cozy room. I'd miss our chess games, Gabriel finally said, capturing one of her pawns. We could still play, Catherine suggested. I wouldn't be far. Gabriel nodded, but something had shifted between them, a tension that hadn't been there before. When Catherine finally bid him good night, he caught her hand gently. Catherine, he stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. I just want you to be happy. You deserve that more than anyone I know. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart flutter. Thank you, Gabriel. That means more than I can say. In her room, Catherine lay awake long into the night, thoughts churning. The idea of leaving the Double P filled her with unexpected sadness. Over these months of healing, the ranch had become home in a way Harold's cabin never had. Alina and Miguel felt like family. And Gabriel had become essential to her happiness in ways she was only beginning to understand. A winter storm blew in the next day, confining everyone to the ranch house. Gabriel and Miguel had managed to bring the horses into the barn just before the worst hit, and now they all gathered in the kitchen, where Alina's cooking filled the house with delicious aromas. In my village in Mexico, we tell stories on days like this, Alina said, serving hot chocolate to everyone, to keep the cold away. They took turns sharing tales, Miguel's adventures as a young man along the border, Alina's childhood in Sonora, Gabriel's mishaps as an Eastern tenderfoot learning the ways of the West. When it came to Catherine, she found herself telling them about her parents, their small bookshop in Boston, and the dreams they'd had for her before illness took them both within a year of each other. They would have wanted me to be brave, she concluded softly, to find happiness somehow. And have you? Gabriel asked, his eyes intent on her face. Found happiness? Catherine met his gaze across the warm kitchen. I'm finding my way toward it. The storm lasted 3 days, during which the small household grew closer still. Catherine and Gabriel spent hours in conversation, discovering shared interests in literature and music. He taught her to play checkers. She showed him how to properly darn socks. In those snowed-in days, something bloomed between them that could no longer be denied. On the 4th morning, Catherine woke to brilliant sunshine reflecting off pristine snow. The world outside was transformed into a glittering wonderland. She dressed quickly and went downstairs, finding Gabriel already at the kitchen table. "I thought I'd ride into town today," he said as she joined him for coffee. "The roads should be clear enough. I need to check mail and pick up supplies." "Would you mind company?" Catherine asked impulsively. "I'd like to inquire about that seamstress position." Something flickered across Gabriel's face, disappointment quickly masked. "Of course. We can take the sleigh." The ride to Silverdale was breathtaking, the countryside transformed by winter's touch. Gabriel handled the horses expertly as they glided over the packed snow. In town, they separated to complete their errands, Gabriel to the general store and post office, Catherine to speak with Mrs. Holloway, who owned the only boarding house in Silverdale. Their conversation was promising. Mrs. Holloway did indeed need a seamstress, and she had a small room available for rent. The arrangements were tentatively made, with Catherine to move in after the new year. As she left the boarding house, Catherine's feelings were mixed. The position would provide independence, exactly what she'd sought. Yet the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Gabriel, left an emptiness in her chest. She found him waiting at the general store, loading supplies into the sleigh. His face brightened at her approach. "How did it go?" he asked. "Well," she replied, "Mrs. Holloway has a room available and she's eager for someone with my skills." "That's wonderful." Gabriel's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "When would you start?" "After New Year's. There's a holiday social at the church first, and Mrs. Holloway thought it would be a good opportunity to meet potential customers." They completed their errands in relative silence, each lost in private thoughts. As they prepared to leave town, Gabriel suddenly turned to her. "Would you like to stop at the cafe for lunch? My treat." The Silver Spoon Cafe was small but warm, offering simple but hearty fare. As they ate, conversation gradually returned, though a certain constraint remained. "Will you come to the holiday social?" Catherine asked as they finished their meal. "I hadn't planned to," Gabriel admitted. "Those gatherings aren't really my forte." "Oh," Catherine tried to hide her disappointment. "I understand." Gabriel studied her face, "but I could make an exception if you'd like me to be there." "I would," she said softly. "Very much." The ride back to the ranch seemed shorter somehow, the awkwardness between them melting as they discussed plans for Christmas. Alina had already begun preparations, determined to create a proper celebration. "It will be my first real Christmas in Montana," Gabriel explained. "Usually it's just been Miguel, Alina and me with a simple dinner. But Alina's insisting on going all out this year." "Because of me?" Catherine asked, surprised. Gabriel glanced at her, his expression warm despite the cold air. "You've brought something special to the ranch, Catherine." "We all feel it." The week before Christmas passed in a flurry of activity. Alina enlisted Catherine's help in creating decorations from pine boughs and dried berries. Miguel and Gabriel brought in a small pine tree, which they set up in the parlor. In the evenings, they strung popcorn and cranberries for garlands, laughing as the horses stomped in the barn and the snow fell gently outside. Catherine found herself savoring each moment, knowing her time at the Double P was limited. She watched Gabriel when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved confidently, whether handling tools or turning pages of a book. The crinkles beside his eyes when he laughed. The quiet concentration he brought to every task. On Christmas Eve, they gathered in the parlor after a festive dinner. Miguel played carols on his guitar while Alina sang in her rich contralto. Gabriel surprised everyone by producing small gifts: a colorful shawl for Alina, a fine new knife for Miguel, and for Catherine, a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much," he said as she carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a delicate silver pendant on a slender chain. The pendant was shaped like a butterfly mariposa, like her gentle mare. "Gabriel, it's beautiful," she breathed. "I saw it at the silversmith's in town months ago," he explained. "It reminded me of you, delicate but strong, ready to take flight." Catherine was speechless, deeply moved by both the gift and its significance. As Miguel and Alina tactfully engaged in conversation, Gabriel helped her fasten the necklace. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll treasure it always." Later, after Alina and Miguel had retired, Catherine and Gabriel sat before the fire, watching the flames dance. "I have something for you too," Catherine said, producing a small package from her pocket. Gabriel unwrapped it carefully to reveal a finely embroidered handkerchief. His initials worked in one corner, surrounded by a border of mountains and pine trees. "Catherine, this is exquisite," he said, running his fingers over the delicate stitching. "You made this," she nodded, suddenly shy. "I wanted you to have something to remember me by. After I moved to town." Gabriel folded the handkerchief carefully and tucked it into his pocket near his heart. "As if I could forget you." The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to voice. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright. After a morning of celebration and a sumptuous dinner, Gabriel suggested a sleigh ride to show Catherine more of the ranch property. Bundled in warm blankets, they glided across the snow-covered landscape as the winter sun cast long blue shadows. "I've been thinking," Gabriel said after they had ridden in comfortable silence for some time, "about your plans to move to town." "Oh," Catherine's heart quickened. "The thing is," he continued, guiding the horses along a ridge overlooking a frozen creek, "the double P is growing. With the Army contract, I'll need help with accounts, correspondence, that sort of thing. Alina's wonderful, but her reading and writing in English are limited." "What are you saying, Gabriel?" He drew the sleigh to a halt, turning to face her. "I'm saying there's a place for you here, Catherine. A position if you want it. You'd have your own room, fair wages, independence, but you could stay at the ranch." Catherine studied his earnest face, understanding what he was offering and what he wasn't. A respectable arrangement. A way for her to remain close without compromising her newly won freedom or his reputation. "That's very generous," she said carefully, "but I wouldn't want to burden you." "You could never be a burden," Gabriel replied, his voice dropping lower. "Catherine, these past months having you here, it's been the happiest time I can remember." The confession hung in the cold air between them, more revealing than perhaps he'd intended. Catherine's heart pounded as she recognized the moment for what it was, a crossroads. "Gabriel," she began, her breath forming small clouds, "are you offering me employment, or is there something more you want to say?" His eyes widened slightly, then softened with resolve. "I'm making a mess of this, aren't I?" He took her gloved hand in his. "Catherine, I don't just want you to stay as an employee. I want you to stay because I've fallen in love with you." The words, so simple and direct, stole Catherine's breath. "Gabriel, I know it's too soon," he hurried on. "After everything you've been through with Harold, the last thing you need is another man making claims on your life. I understand if you need your independence, need time to heal and find yourself. But I couldn't let you go to town without at least telling you how I feel." Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. "I've fallen in love with you too," she whispered. "I think I have been for quite some time." Gabriel's face transformed with hope. "Truly, truly," she confirmed. "But you're right, I do need time. I need to know who I am on my own before I can fully belong to someone else, even someone as wonderful as you." Understanding and respect filled his eyes. "Then take all the time you need. I'll wait." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Catherine met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. Unlike Harold's rough demands, Gabriel's touch was gentle, asking rather than taking. When they parted, Catherine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "So," Gabriel said, his smile brighter than the winter sun on snow, "will you stay at the Double P, in whatever capacity feels right to you?" "Yes," Catherine replied, certainty filling her. "Yes, I'll stay." The new year brought changes to the Double P. Gabriel's army contract began in earnest, requiring expanded facilities for the growing herd of horses. Catherine took over the ranch accounts and correspondence, discovering she had a talent for organization that complemented Gabriel's vision. True to his word, Gabriel gave Catherine the space and time she needed. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and deepening affection. They worked side by side during the day and spent evenings in conversation or companionable silence. Sometimes their hands would touch, or their eyes would meet with unspoken understanding, but Gabriel never pressed for more than Catherine was ready to give. In February, news came that the Prescott property would indeed be auctioned for back taxes. Gabriel bid successfully, expanding the Double P-Ticket's boundaries. Together, he and Catherine rode out to what had briefly been her marital home. "What will you do with it?" she asked as they surveyed the dilapidated cabin. "Tear it down," Gabriel replied without hesitation. "Build something new." "That place holds nothing but bad memories." Catherine nodded, feeling a chapter of her life closing definitively. "I'd like that." Spring came to Montana in fits and starts, warm days followed by sudden snowstorms, muddy thaws giving way to freezing nights. But by April, the land was awakening in earnest. Catherine watched in wonder as wildflowers carpeted meadows that had been snow-covered just weeks before. It was on one such day, as they picnicked in a field of blue lupines, that Gabriel broached the subject that had hovered unspoken between them. "Catherine," he began, his usual confidence giving way to endearing nervousness, "we've known each other nearly a year now." 10 months, she corrected with a smile. 10 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, he countered, making her laugh. "But who's counting?" He took her hand, his expression growing serious. "In that time, I've watched you rebuild your life with courage and grace. You've become indispensable to the ranch and to me." Catherine's heart began to race as she recognized the direction of his words. "I promised I'd give you time, and I've tried to keep that promise," Gabriel continued. "But I find myself hoping, every day, that you might be ready for something more, that you might consider a future together, not as employer and employee, but as partners in every sense." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I'm not Harold Prescott, Catherine. I'll never try to own you or diminish you. What I want is to walk beside you, to build something beautiful together." Opening the box revealed a simple but elegant ring, a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires set in gold. "Catherine Fallon, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks as emotions overwhelmed her: joy, gratitude, love, and the profound realization of how far she had come from that terrified mail-order bride who had stepped off the train less than a year ago. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Gabriel. I would be proud to be your wife." His answering smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When he kissed her, Catherine felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. They were married in June, when the Montana countryside was at its most glorious. Unlike her first wedding, this one was a true celebration. The entire community turned out, ranchers and townspeople alike, all of whom had watched Catherine's journey from victim to survivor to the confident woman who now stood beside Gabriel Porter. Alina had decorated the ranch house with wildflowers and ribbons. Miguel served as Gabriel's best man, while Mrs. Holloway stood with Catherine. The territorial judge who had granted Catherine's divorce now performed a very different service. uniting her with a man who treasured rather than terrorized her. "I promise to respect your strength, nurture your dreams, and walk beside you in all of life's journeys," Gabriel vowed, his voice steady and sure. "Your happiness will be my happiness, your sorrows mine to help bear. This is my solemn promise to you, Catherine, today and all the days to come." Catherine, radiant in a gown of ivory silk that she had made herself, replied with equal conviction, "I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your vision while pursuing my own, and to love you with the fullness of a heart that has known darkness and therefore recognizes true light. This is my pledge to you, Gabriel, freely given and joyfully made." Their kiss sealed vows that meant infinitely more than the empty words exchanged in that dusty cabin with Harold. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and toasts to the couple whose unlikely love story had captivated the community. Later, as they stood on the porch of the ranch house, now their home together, Gabriel wrapped his arms around his wife and gazed up at the star-filled Montana sky. "Happy?" he asked simply. Catherine leaned back against his solid strength, covering his hands with hers. "Completely. And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Welcome home, Mrs. Porter." Catherine smiled, turning in his arms to face him. "I've been home since the day you brought me here. I just didn't know it yet." Their life together unfolded with the changing seasons. The Double P prospered under their joint stewardship, Gabriel's expertise with horses complemented by Catherine's business acumen. She established a small dressmaking business that served the growing community, working from a sunny room Gabriel added to the ranch house. In their second year of marriage, Catherine gave birth to a son they named James, after Gabriel's father. Alina doted on the baby, declaring him the most perfect child in the territory. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, Alina Catherine Porter, named for the woman who had become like a mother to them both. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Gabriel surprised Catherine by taking her to the special overlook where he had first shown her the ranch. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" he asked, spreading a blanket for them to sit on. "Of course," Catherine replied, settling beside him. "I was still healing, still afraid of what the future held." Gabriel took her hand, running his thumb over the ring that had never left her finger. "Look at what we've built since then." Below them, the Double P spread in ordered beauty, expanded barns, lush pastures, the ranch house now twice its original size. In the distance, where Harold's cabin had once stood, a new structure housed the ranch hands who helped manage their growing operation. "It's remarkable," Catherine agreed, "but the most precious things we've built aren't visible from here." Gabriel nodded, understanding perfectly. Their children, their partnership, the deep and abiding love that had grown between them, these were the true achievements of their years together. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" he asked. "If I hadn't come to check on you that day," Catherine considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then, I remember something my father used to say, that life has a way of leading us where we need to go, even when the path seems darkest." "Wise man, your father," Gabriel said, drawing her close. "He would have loved you," Catherine told him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Almost as much as I do." As the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, Catherine Porter reflected on her journey. From desperate mail-order bride to beloved wife and mother, from victim to survivor to creator of her own destiny. The cruel man who had nearly destroyed her was now a fading memory, while the kind neighbor who had offered sanctuary had become the cornerstone of her happiness. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Catherine smiled, turning to the man who had taught her what love truly meant. "I'm thinking that sometimes. The longest journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be." Gabriel's answering kiss was tender and familiar, yet still held the power to make her heart race. Together they watched the sunset bathe their Montana home in golden light, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the frontier might bring, they would face them as they had faced all others side by side, with courage and unwavering love.